Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your own drum sounds from scratch in Ableton. Let's get right into it. When it comes to making drum sounds, there are three types of sound sources you can start off with. First off is recorded sounds. This could be actual instruments like drums or percussion, or Foley sounds that you record for later processing. I've got my car keys right here. Let's do some Ramzoid style percussion. Nice. The next sound source is going to be synthesized sounds. This can be from an analog synth like the Korg Minilog here, or from any software synth like Serum or Vital. This is one of the best ways to design sounds because it gives you complete control over how the sound is made. The last sound source is going to be sampled sounds, and by that I mean samples from other libraries like drum kits or plugins. This is where things fall into a gray area of whether or not they are from scratch, but here's my opinion. The way I like to use sample sounds is as a base, and whether I use them as a layer for my own sound source, or just apply basic processing to make something new, I'm going to end up with something that sounds different. We'll get more into this as well. So these are the three types of sound sources we have to work with, but it's time to talk about the most important part of sound design, which is processing. This is the step where you take the sound source and actually shape it into a finished sound. If I put these raw Foley recordings into a kit, people are going to be pissed that they spent money on it. So they need processing. This is the most important part, but it's also the part that gives you the most creative freedom to do whatever you want. I'm going to get into some specific ideas in the video, but it all comes down to your own creativity and your judgment for how you want to shape the sound. Alright, with all that out of the way, it's time for some sound design. I'm going to start with these recorded sounds. Probably the most important effect and one that you're going to use on every single sound is EQ. This is how you shape the frequencies of the sound. For example, in this Foley, there's a ton of low end from the mic that is muddying up the sound. We're going to cut that out and boost some of the important frequencies up here. By important, I just mean the ones that sound good to me. And this EQ is just a start. After we add more effects, I'll probably add a second EQ to shape it even further. Another super useful tool for drums is saturation. Depending on what plugin you use, you'll have different options for distorting and changing the sound. A lot of people use Saturn 2 since it has a lot of really great distortion types. I don't have that much money, so I'm gonna go with the free saturation knob by Softtube. Saturation boosts levels, but it also adds harmonics depending on the type you use. One of the reasons people say analog sounds better is because of the built-in saturation that a lot of analog gear provides. Before saturation, and after. The last thing I'm going to throw on these keys is a compressor. Compression is a popular topic on YouTube because for some reason a lot of people are really confused by it. All compression does is take the volume and turn it down whenever it goes above a certain level. You can adjust the attack and release to control how fast it reacts and how slow or fast it brings the level back up. So that's great, but why do we need that? If I take a short piece of this keys sound, I'll show you how it can add a sharp attack, or what a lot of people call punch, and also bring down the body of the sound so it isn't as harsh. If you go really far down with a compressor, it'll make the tail end of a sound louder because everything else is quieter by comparison. With another EQ at the end, we now have this. So that's cool, but we're only in the realm of effects samples. I want to move on to kicks and snares because that's what I get most excited about in a sample pack. Let's start working with some synthesized sounds. So I've got this file that's just a long recording of me messing with the Minilog to create some weird noises. If you want a video on how I made that, leave a comment down below. I specifically tried to make some sounds that would be good for kicks and snares. So let's go through and find some good bits to work on. Okay, so I've picked out some cool sounds and I want to start by making a snare. I've been really into hyperpop lately and one of my favorite sounds is those tonal like metal snares that they use. So this sound is really high pitched and I think it would be perfect for something like that. I'm also going to bring down some of these high mids to clean up the sound a little bit. For this sound, I really want that weird metal sound, and the effect that we're going to use to get that is delay. If you use a really short delay with a high feedback, you start to generate this tonal sound. Other ways to get that metal sound are with a resonator, vocoder, or a physical modeling effect like Ableton's Corpus. This sound is a good start, but it's pretty raw still. Next, I'll use some reverb to widen the sound. I'm actually going to use a convolution reverb since they tend to bring out random frequencies, which might be good for this snare. Convolution reverbs use an impulse response to get the characteristics of the reverb. So I'll go through the included banks of impulses to find one that sounds good. Nice. So now I'll add in a saturation again, this time with Ableton saturator, and finish it off with another EQ and compressor. And the finished sound sounds like this. Awesome. So that's cool, but I know most of you don't have an analog synth sitting around. So let's make the next sound in Vital. The best part about Vital is that it's free. Well, that and it's one of the best software synths around. So let's go ahead and make a kick drum from scratch. Making kicks is probably the easiest drum to do in a synth like this one. We need to start out with a wavetable, so I'll go into basic shapes and grab a sine wave. That doesn't sound anything like a kick drum, so we need to shape the sound using what are called envelopes. An envelope just changes a parameter over time. This can be volume, panning, distortion, pitch, literally anything can be mapped to an envelope which will move it up and down. In Vital, the first envelope controls the volume, so let's bring that down to make a short thump. Nice. I'll go to a new envelope and make it an even shorter click, and then we're going to assign this to the pitch. Now we've got a click at the start, which will be the transient for our kick drum. To bring out that transient even more, I'm going to put the same envelope on the volume of this sample oscillator, which is playing white noise. I'll go ahead and filter that white noise so it doesn't add in any low frequencies. Now let's move to the effects section. I'll start by adding distortion. If you're listening on a phone, now you can actually hear something. There's a few different distortion types in Vital, but different synths are going to give you different options. On top of that, I'll add Vital's compressor to sharpen the attack. Next, I want to add a filter that moves with the short envelope. That way we filter out all the high end, but we keep the attack. Nice, that sounds good. Now we've got a pretty basic kick, but of course I'm not done. Now that we have a good source, post-processing can really help shape the sound. I'll grab an EQ and sweep through the low mids to see if there's anything I can take out to clean up the sound. Right about there sounds good. That sounds better. I'll throw on another distortion. We can go for something crazy like Ableton's Amp or Trash 2 by iZotope. Both of these can be really aggressive and add some crunch to our kick. I'll bring the mix down so it's not as aggressive and add another compressor to shape our transient. Finally, I will add an EQ, and here's our finished kick. Moving on, the last way to start a sound is by using pre-recorded audio samples as either layers or a bass. I'm going to take another one of these mini log noises and layer it with a snare from this EDM drum kit. Again, some people might point at this and say, well, it's not from scratch, but with the processing that goes on, we're going to wind up with an entirely new sound. So to make sure we get something different, I'm going to grab SoundToy's Effect Rack. This is a fairly expensive plugin, but I want to talk about why multi-effects plugins can be really good. They give you the ability to pull up complex chains quickly. Some other plugins in this category are Trash 2, Portal, and Thermal by Output, RC20, or Digitalis by Aberrant Audio. With these types of plugins, your sound design can come from a preset starting point that you wouldn't have come up with yourself. So let's go through some Effect Rack presets and find a good starting point. Alright, so that's already sounding completely different. So let's look at this with the compressor. Put some bit crushing on it. The next step is going to be to go through with our EQ again and shape the frequency spectrum. I'm going to pitch down this one. The last thing I'm going to do is add on Trash 2 again because I really want to sort of change the way that the sound hits. This adds in like this knock to it that I really like. Ooh, I've got an idea. I'm going to use the feedback on this to create a really cool sound. I got to make sure I put a limiter on. That's the thing about these types of effects is that you never know what you're going to get, so they allow for a lot of really creative sound design. I'm gonna go ahead and automate the feedback on this so that we get that screech right at the start. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and record a bunch of these screechy things while I'm twisting around the knob, and we'll have our final snare. And there we go, a ton of really crazy hyperpop snares from an effect rack preset. Super cool. So overall, this was kind of an introduction to sound design. I'm making this video as part of the process of making my first drum kit, and I'm going to be putting it out hopefully early January at some point, and it's going to be free if you follow me on Instagram. I'm hoping in 2 weeks or so to have a full drum kit ready to go with a lot of these types of really interesting sounds. But yeah, that about sums it up in terms of the process for sound design and the different ways you can start out and how you go about it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Happy 2023. Kill 'em.